Hello, welcome to a quick presentation on how to get started with funnel analysis. My name is Harish, and I'm one of the senior advisors at Broadcom, and I'll be walking through the session, helping you navigate for understanding what funnel analysis is, how do you configure and set up funnel analysis for metric analyzing for your use cases, and then helping you kind of view the data that you collect using App Experience Analytics and understanding how the funnel setup works. Now, to an overview of what funnel analysis is, basically it's a visual representation of your user's journey through your application from an omni-channel perspective, being it if they use a mobile or a web to access the application. We want the ability to create a visual representation of the user journey to understand how the user journey directly impacts metrics such as revenue, metrics such as user drop-offs and user interactions, and also metrics such as user interaction with your application. Now, at a quick example, if let's say there's an application that you use to provide insurance quotes for your users, and you want to navigate and understand how the users interact with your application, funnel analysis helps you define a specific block they're interested in investigating or interested in understanding how users interact with the application, and then gives you metrics from your defined starting point and ending point within your application, and gives that useful information and metrics such as how the users interact with your application, how many screens they navigate through to get to the end result or the end goal, and if there were any drop-offs due to a variety of reasons such as a mobile app crash or a JavaScript error on your page or the users voluntarily leaving a page. These are metrics that you can glean from setting up a funnel. So in a nutshell, to summarize, a funnel is basically capturing a specific part of your business workflow and understanding how your users enter and exit through the business flow, and also the ability to capture metrics around the business flow. So for this tutorial, what we're going to do is understand how a funnel analysis works, and then I'm going to help you show how to set up a funnel. We're going to also take a look at an existing funnel once we set it up, and then the ability to analyze metrics and the ability to drill down and filter for a specific user session that you might be interested in understanding how the interaction with the application took place. So funnel basically gives you high-level metrics towards a defined goal. Now, what would you define as a goal? So in the previous example that I gave you, where you have an example of an insurance application where users get quotes for a variety of policies, such as an auto policy or a home insurance policy or an RV or a boat policy. Now, let's say that you're interested in understanding, or let's say you're interested in gleaning the metrics from how many users actually look up a quote versus how many users actually end up buying a quote. Now, these are two specific business use cases that will be apt for creating a funnel analysis on. So in the first use case, I want to see how many users log into the system, or without logging in, how many users are filling out their basic information to look up quotes for their specific use case. And in the second use case, once they look up a quote, I want to understand the churn rate, which is how many users looked up a quote versus how many users actually ended up buying. Now, if you have a large drop-off at that space, now that's missed revenue. So funnel gives you information on who are these users, assuming they have logged in and they have some login information, either through the use of username tagging or cookie capture. And it also gives you metrics on how many successful policies were delivered after they were looked up. So in this example, let's say there were 50 policies that a customer looked up, but he ended up buying, or only 49 of them ended up buying it, and there was one drop-off where the user basically just got a quote, but ended up not purchasing the policy. Now you can go and analyze if there was an issue where the user was not interested in the policy, or if the user experienced an issue where the user was trying to buy a policy, but then either experienced a mobile app crash or experienced a web page error where the user was unable to complete his transaction. The funnel gives you metrics on individual granular information such as the username, what the user was trying to do in terms of actions, where the user dropped off, and why they dropped off. So basically, the ability to organize, filter, and pivot by user segment or dimension on how the user interacts with your application is the fundamental basics of using funnel analysis for your understanding. Now, to create a funnel, the basic concept is, like we explained before, in your application, you basically pretty much divide the application into individual chunks or individual business flows. And then you as a business app owner or a business app developer, you understand how the users are navigating through your application. Now, this information can also be provided to you out of the box using App Experience Analytics. So you can also use the information that App Experience Analytics gives you to create a funnel. Or if you have prior knowledge on how the users interact with the application, the ability is to create a starting goal and an end goal. Now, in this case of an example that we've been discussing so far, where you have this insurance application, for understanding or creating a funnel where I want to see how many users end up successfully looking up a quote versus how many users drop off, my starting goal would be where the users log into the main page, navigating through them, filling out their personal information, and then all the way to the end where they actually look up a quote. Now, if the quote is successfully displayed, that would be a successful completion of my end goal. Now, in this journey, let's say in the screen where the user fills out personal information, or the user clicks generate quote, and there's a drop-off, I want to understand what the issue was, why the user dropped off, and who was the user who dropped off. In the second example where we wanted to convert or get the churn rates of how many users end up successfully looking up a quote versus how many users actually end up buying a policy, in this case, my starting goal would be from the time the policy or the quote was displayed to the user till the time the user actually filled out their personal information, used their payment information, and basically went to the end goal of successfully getting a confirmation code for them purchasing a policy. Personal information card can be skipped because the funnel is configurable. By default, out of the box, we do not capture any personal information unless notified by the user. So in these two examples, we have clearly defined the start goal and the end goal, and we want to see how the user's journey through my start and end is, and also glean metrics on information such as the different users who have navigated through this journey, how many iterations of journeys, meaning from my start to the end, there can be multiple iterations of how users navigate from my start point to my end point. A quick example here is someone who can fill out their personal information to generate a quote, and then basically the session times out, and the user logs in again to kind of proceed with the quote that he was trying to obtain, and then he logs in with his prior information where all his contact info is already filled out. And then at this point, he only creates or clicks on generate quote. Now, in this case, the flow is from the first page to the second page, where the second page times out, and then he logs back in, which takes him back to the first page, and then he goes to the second page where the information is already filled out, and the third page where the quote is successfully displayed. Now, this is two flows for the same user. So this is what funnel gives you in terms of metrics. So it gives you how the users interact with your application. What are the multiple iterations or variances through which users can hit the start point and the end point? And if there are any drop-offs or if there are any issues between my start and end goal, to analyze who these users who are impacted, why they dropped off, was it an issue on my backend, was it an issue on the application, or was it the user who was unwilling to proceed with the journey? And then also glean additional metrics on top of that to figure out information such as a specific application version where users might be dropping off more, a specific operating system versions where users might be dropping off more, or a specific geolocation where we see more of these drop-offs. So that, in a sense, explains the requirement for having funnel analysis and the ease and the ability with which App Experience Analytics helps you set up funnel analytics out of the box based on the metrics we already collect on your application to successfully show you this user journey, the user interaction, and giving you the reasons for any drop-offs, assuming if there are any. At this point, we will stop with the presentation. We'll take a quick look at a demo where we'll walk you through how to set up the funnel, understanding how the funnel works, the different metrics around the funnel, and then as an exercise, we'll walk you through setting up an actual funnel and understanding the metrics and the journeys around it. So at this point, everyone should be seeing a screen where I'm showing you the main overview page of App Experience Analytics. In this case, I have multiple applications that are reporting data back into my App Experience Analytics, and I have metrics such as sessions, HTTP requests. Basically, these are user journeys or user sessions on my application. So in this case, assuming a funnel has been already set up, you will see the completion rate at the bottom on the main overview page and the number of activities that I'm tracing using the funnel. Now, our goal is to understand how to set up a funnel first, which is what we will tackle. Now, let us take a look at this application called TixChange. So now, to give you a brief background, this is a simple application that mimics something like a StubHub or Ticketmaster that helps you analyze user navigation or user interaction through an application where a user logs in or creates a username and password to log in, views different items that are up for selection, such as concert tickets, sports tickets, theater performance tickets, and then adds these items to his shopping carts and successfully checks out. So if I were to click at any of these sessions, now this is a sample application from a user, let's say user 1, and then you can see that this user basically interacted with the application in this way. So since this is a web application, we do not show screenshots. So in this case, if you look at the page URLs, which is all the individual HTML pages that the user navigated through, you can see that the first page that he landed on was index.html. And then the user was trying to log in, which is why he clicked on sign-on form. So it gave him a sign-on form where he actually filled out his username and password. Then he successfully signed on. Then after the sign-on, you can see that the user was routed back to the index.html page. But in this case, now the user is signed on, so we have a valid username. And then the user is looking at various categories of tickets, individual products inside those categories, individual items inside those products. He's basically adding specific items to his shopping cart. He clicks on checkout. So on the checkout page, he gets a form that says, hey, fill out your information for us to successfully check you out, which he does. And then once the order is placed and he successfully checks out, it takes him back to the main page. Now, this is a typical flow through an application where you can actually see the individual elements and the pages that the user navigated through and all the different iterations and flows through which the user interacted with this application called TixChange. Now, in our case, let us say that since the index.html page is getting repeated multiple times, now setting up a funnel in this case would not be ideal because the funnel would be going from page 1 to 2 to 3 to 4, 2 to 3, and then back to 1. And then you will see the index.html in the end once the user successfully checks out again. So it will be variations of the same flow, but with duplicates of the main page showing up inconsistently through the flow. To avoid this, let's say in this case, I want to see my business use cases to understand how many people successfully sign on to my TixChange application, and then how many end up successfully checking out the products or adding item to the cart and then successfully checking out, and then understanding if there are any drops, why the user dropped off or where the user dropped off. So now I have a clear understanding of how my funnel should be set up and what my starting goal and my end goal is. In this case, my starting goal would be sign-on form, which is where the user is presented with a credential page to put in the username and password. And then my last or end goal would be successfully checking out, which would be this form called neworder.html. So to set up the funnel, click on the Manage Apps section on the main page of your App Experience Analytics application. In this case, we are trying to set up a funnel for an application called TixChange East Coast Data Center. So I would click on the application. And then on the top right, you'll see a link or a button that says Business Activity Configuration, which in our lingo, we call it the funnel analysis. So basically, this is the configuration I need to set up to activate business activity monitoring and create a funnel for my predefined start and end goals. Clicking on Business Activity Configuration shows me different elements or metrics on each of these pages. Now, this is a high-level map view, This shows you information on how many times a specific URL has been called. In this case, the index.html has been called in the last 30 days about 10,000 times. And then this is the add item to cart. To make it more legible and meaningful, you can always click on list view that shows you by order of session count how many individual hits or sessions, or basically user journeys, access these individual pages. You can also filter, assuming your application has multiple pages, which is more than 1,000 pages. You can also filter here to look at specific pages. So this is a dynamic search, meaning I don't have to hit enter. Just by me typing in index or even IN, it shows me all the pages that match these names. Now, if I want to only create a funnel analysis for sessions that are more than 6,000, so let's say I do 6,100 or more, then I only see these pages that have higher user hits or higher user interactions that show up. Now, this is an ideal way before you set up the funnel to narrow down or filter through the list of multiple pages to create a funnel that meets your specific use case. In my example, since the application has only 10 pages, it's easier for me to view all these pages on a single screen. In cases where there are multiple pages or multiple screens from a mobile application where the ability to view them in a single pane is not possible, you have the option of either filtering them by name, the page name or the transaction name, or by filtering by the high number of user interactions that the users had with these pages and with these screens. Now in this case, we are trying to set up a new business activity funnel. So I would choose that. If you already have a business activity funnel that needs to be edited, you can always click here and then edit these later. In our case, we are going to set up a new business activity. So I'm going to choose new business activity here. Since my application has legible pages and lesser number of options, I'm not going to filter on anything here. I'm going to call my business activity name Exchange Flow. Since I'm going to be interested in understanding the entire flow through my application from beginning to end, and since we already deduced what my starting and ending point would be, in this case, the sign-on form is my starting point, and the new order is my end goal, which is where the user successfully end up checking out. I would define my activity entry and activity goal. Now, if you click on the information icon here, it also shows you what activity entry and activity goal means, which is the exact same description that we previously discussed when we were analyzing an individual session to understand how users navigate through the application. Once you have set up the activity name, you have defined your starting goal, which is your activity entry, and the end goal, which is your activity goal. You have two other options here. Now, there are two rules that dictate how the funnel works. The first one is really simple. It says conversion timeout. This typically means how long do users spend inside the page before you want to either skip capturing the page or you want to force capture the page. Let's say the user clicks through a couple of pages, or there's a dynamic page load which reroutes you through 4 different pages before it takes the user to a page that they're interested in looking at. Now, as part of the out-of-the-box capture, App Experience Analytics will capture all those pages. Now, if you want to skip those pages, you can always skip them. So if I put a conversion timeout of 1, that means I only capture pages that have a duration of less than 1 minute. Now, if I put in 10, any page that has less than a 10-minute conversion or churn will be captured. Now, if a user logs off or times out, or if the application takes an unnecessarily bigger time to load, this would not be meaningful to pollute the funnel with information such as a data center issue or a backend being down, because that would not give accurate representation of a user interaction with the application. That would be an application issue. In this case, for this example, the conversion timeout would be 1, because by looking at the session, I can see that every page was navigated through really quick, within 5 to 6 seconds. So I'm more comfortable with the 1-minute conversion timeout. The max page and screen states is the really simple option of all these. How many screens or states should I capture, assuming there are multiple pages or screens between my start and end? How many should I capture to show you a meaningful funnel? Let's say there are 100 screens. Now, if I were to put up 100 screens, it would be difficult to scroll through the funnel to understand where the drop-offs are occurring within these 100 screens. So if I put in 10, the funnel is limited to the 10 pages that have maximum user interactions. Let's say there are 100 pages within my start and end goal, but there are only 10 pages that have meaningful user interactions. The rest are either redirects or like a single sign-on or a SAML authentication, which is unnecessary for me to capture as part of the funnel. Those will be skipped automatically based on the value that you put in here. In this case, since the total number of URLs that I have for this application is 10, my max page or screen states would be 10. Once you have defined all this information, just click on Create, and you should see a message that shows you that the business activity has been created successfully. You can go ahead and close this message, and now this would be your funnel analysis or your business activity called TickChange_flow. By default, we use machine learning to understand how the users interact with your application. So the funnel creation is not instant. It takes up to 3 to 4 hours for the funnel to be available based on what we use our algorithms to learn from the user interactions, to understand patterns, recognize flows, and then show you a funnel. For the purposes of this example, I've already pre-created a funnel which has the same activity entry and the activity goal, which we will go back and analyze. In this case, navigating back through my main page, if I were to go back to the funnel, which is located in app funnel/activities from the main page, you'll see that I have another funnel called demo funnel. In this case, it is the same start and end goal, such as the TickChange flow that we just created, where I start the activity from sign-on form.html, and I end the activity in new order. So this would be a typical funnel that represents user interaction to your application. In this case, over the last 30 days, for this specific application called TickChange East Coast DC, for which we have set up this funnel, you can see that there are a total of 286 user sessions that started on sign-on form. And now all the way through view category, you can see that the user sessions were captured, which means at this point, I don't have any drop-offs or I don't have any branches. All the users who came onto the sign-on form page successfully also ended up on the view category page. Now, there are some users who directly clicked on view items, which is represented here in this flow. If you notice, there are 286 on the view category page, but only 284 looked at the different products. There are probably 2 users who already knew what they were looking for and directly ended up on the view item page. Now, this is typically not indicative of a drop. This only shows you a different branch or a different iteration of navigation that these users took through the application to understand what they were looking for. So these are the different flows which is automatically shown to you through the application. So these define the user journey through your application. In this case, I'm having a very successful application where there are no significant drop-offs. So there's nothing that's marked here that's visible. Now, to understand user journeys, I can click on a specific item, let's say add item to cart, and let's say within this funnel, I'm interested in understanding how users navigated from add item to cart to clicking on view form. Now, this would be my start and end. And now, if I click on the funnel analysis link here, I'm able to further shrink this funnel, which is about 10 pages long, to about 3 pages, and then show you if there are any drop-offs between add item to cart, which is 280, to view order from, which is also 280, which is good because I don't have any significant drop-offs. So you also have the ability to click dynamically on a funnel that's already been generated to further shrink or further drill down into something specific that you're looking for. The flows here shows you the typical flows which we calculate using our algorithms. So top 2 flows, top 5 flows, the main difference being what is the main flow through which users navigate through the application, which is this one, which is all the way through to view category where I have the same sessions, then I have these 2 drop-offs. Now, if I want a more granular flow, right, rather than just looking at the top 2, show me the top 5, now you will see additional flows here that you were not previously looking at on the top 2 ones because these are ranked 3, 4, and 5, which was also made up of the user interaction through the application that you can further analyze. So we give you a predefined option to view either the top 2, 3, 4, or top 5 flows of how users interact with your application. Now let us choose an application that has drop-offs to understand how the drop-offs works and how to analyze why the users are dropping off. In this case, I would be switching to a different application which has user drop-offs that indicate why the users actually dropped off from the application. So the goals are the same. The application is pretty much tick change, but then the activities are a little different to help you understand better why the users dropped off. In this case, again, my start and end goal are set up exactly the same. So in this case, this would be a different application called Tick Change West Coast DC, but it's the exact same flow as the other Tick Change application under which we set up the funnel. In this case, my start goal again is the sign-on form. My end goal is going to be the new order form, which is the same as what we previously set up and what we looked at. But in this case, you'll notice that I do have some drop-offs that are indicated in red. Now, I know that people navigated from the sign-on form where they filled out their username and password field, and then they actually clicked on the Sign Me In button, and then they're supposed to be shown the main screen. This I would know by either looking at the metrics App Experience Analytics collects out of the box, or as an app developer or a business app owner, I would know the flow through the application. So in this case, I do have some drop-offs here, which might indicate one of two things just by looking at it. One, either when the user clicked on the sign-on, they had an incorrect username password, which is why they were taken back to the sign-on form page, or the users were not able to sign on either to a locked account, or the user dropped off because they closed the browser after putting out their information to sign them in, and they abruptly ended the session right here. Now, these are all possible reasons why they dropped off. Now, to further analyze this, if you clicked on the drops, you will see that it actually filters specifically by the drops and shows you the users who experienced the most drops. In this case, I have user 5 who had 19 drops, who on an average only looked at 2 screens, which is the main page where he filled out his username and password, and the second page where he clicked on the sign in button, where he unsuccessfully was not able to go to the third page, and then he had to drop off. So to further understand why this user dropped off, I can click on this specific user. Now, of all the 19 drops, you'll show that it shows me the 19 sessions that this individual user took and all the individual drops that this user faced. Now, by clicking on any of these sessions in detail, it takes me back to the sessions page, which gives me more insights into how the user was interacting through the application. In this case, if you notice, the user basically came into index, basically filled out the main page where he or she typed in their usernames and passwords, and then when they clicked on submit, basically the network call was what we're looking at, which was successful, but then this shows me that the user basically dropped off on this page. So this is a user drop-off, not something related to an application issue or not a network error, because by looking at all the network events, we're able to see that there are no network errors that would be indicated typically by an HTTP error code and also an NWE symbol on App Experience Analytics. Going back to the funnel shows me not only the analysis on why the user dropped off, but also the ability to look at the individual drops and the individual users and metrics around why these users dropped off. Now, looking at the metric charts for this specific funnel that we call Tick Change funnel, I can see that in this example, we have the same version of the application. So it's the same version of the application that the users also experienced the drop-offs in. And the platform from which they were accessing is a web platform, which is why it shows up as unknown. This might be a Linux or an unknown operating system type. So at a different example to look at metrics, so this is from another mobile application, which is more specific. Now you can see here on this example, based on user journeys and drop-offs. So let's say that this is my funnel, and I have some drop-offs at a specific spot, let's say upgrade to gold. Now you can see this user session that had this drop-off called Omar. Now clicking on that session, going back to what we were looking at, since this is a mobile session, now gives you more metrics and screenshots. Now you also have the ability to do a video playback, which is a feature available in AXA to understand what the user was doing when the user was interacting through the application. So in this case, looks like the user was trying to upgrade, They clicked on the upgrade button, but then they ended up canceling it. You can see that happening here. And then you can also see that the user left some feedback here saying that I'm looking for a cheaper plan. And then it shows me the metrics that I've lost because this user successfully did not complete an upgrade transaction. They were trying to upgrade, but then they found that the plan was too expensive, and then they dropped off. So in this case, this is a user forcing a drop-off because he or she was not comfortable with the plan and basically dropped off at this page where it was asking them to successfully put in their payment details to upgrade their plan. So here on the metric charts, if I were to remove the filter, you can see that you have more metrics here that shows you if there is a specific version of the application that's experiencing more drops versus others. So in this case, both my drops came from application version 13.3. Since in our case we deduced that it was the user who dropped off, this would not glean any additional information. But on specific examples where if the application was having an issue, the metrics page also gives you the ability to find out if there's a specific version of the applications that are experiencing the most drops in order to go troubleshoot or analyze that version in particular to help fix any issues that might be causing challenges for the users from navigating or interacting with the application. Now, beyond what we have here on the funnel, one last option that I wanted to show everyone was the ability to add metrics or the ability to add filters. Now, we have a filter section here. Let's say you want to filter for a specific user, let's say Omar, which is the same user we looked at. Now, you have the ability to add a filter, and this whole funnel gets filtered for that specific user. So you're able to go from a high 10,000 feet view to the ability to filter granularly for a specific users on how the funnel or how the user interaction through the application was for this specific user. You also have the ability to add filters for the reasons for the drop. Let's say to see if there were any crashes, mobile or vice versa. In this case, I don't have any crashes because we deduced that it was the user who dropped off. Or you also have the ability to filter by the number of screens that the user is looking at, or by specific page name, or by a specific username, which we just looked at. So this, in a sense, shows you how to use the funnel analysis for understanding business activity configuration, monitoring user interactiveness with your application, and understanding how users navigate or the user journey propagates through your application, and also helps you give you specific metrics and insights on how the users navigated, where they came in from, if they dropped off, where was the drop-off at, and what was the reason for the drop-off. And using the funnel, you can also drill down to a more granular level to isolate users who specifically had more drops compared to others, or the ability to filter by a specific version of an application that might be causing more drops than the other, in order for you to analyze and troubleshoot and react much faster to issues that might be impacting your revenue or any activities that might be impacting your overall flow through the application. This concludes the session for funnel analysis. Thank you everyone for attending the session.